my people, how you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. Now, I do apologize for missing out on videos yesterday. It was not my intention whatsoever. We had a few problems here and there. As you will also see, the background is slightly different. But what will remain the same is the tactical video. So, in today's video, obviously, we're going to be talking about Carlo Ancelotti's new 4-2-2 formation / the 4-4-2 formation as well. As you can see, I've set it up as a 4-2-2, and then in the defensive side of things, we'll also go over that. They do tend to set up in a 4-4-2. So let's hop on straight into the video. So looking at the formation, it's a 4-2-2. There's one goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs, 2 full-backs, 2 DMs, 2 attacking midfielders, and then of course 2 strikers. Now with the tactics, I couldn't really decide how to fit everything into it, with obviously how you want to try and set up defensively as well as trying to have a bit more of an offensive platform to build up off of. So I think tactical vision set to custom best suited. And what I will say is, try and implement and bring in certain coaches that have the tiki-taka style of football as well as the gegenpressing style of football. I think those two sets of coaches would do quite well in this system. Moving on to the defense though, the defensive style I've set to pressure on heavy touch. They look to try and keep their compact, tight formation, and then if the opposition make a mistake, they'll obviously look to try and pounce that mistake and then try and transition quite quickly into an attacking threat. As for the team width, I've set it to 30. Now obviously this is a very compact system, making it very hard for the opposition to try and get their offense through the lines and try and play it between some of your centre-backs. And it's going to be their job to try and break up the play. And obviously you are playing a very exposed backline in certain moments with this team and the way that they try and set out. So having a compact system does help you in that favor. As for the depth, it's set to a high line, set to 80. And you will see with the defensive setup, it does drop to a low block. But for the balanced approach and the normal out there that you will be looking for, I think a high line does best help this team in the offensive side of things as well as the defensive side of things. So now moving on to the offensive side of things, the builder play, I've set it to balanced. This incorporates a varied amount of different tactical offensive outlets that you can look to try and use. Of course, the long ball approach, the Tony Kroos over the top ball into the likes of Vinny Jr. or the likes of Rodrigo, whoever you have in your front line. You would want to incorporate that as well as having the ability to slow things down, let Luka Modric and Tony Kroos operate a bit more on the ball, trying to unlock the opposition's backline if they are being very, hard to break down. Low block teams tend to be very difficult, or potentially having the ability to counterattack quite effectively, swiftly, and score lots of goals. And that's more or less what you're trying to do with the balanced approach for the build-up play. As for the chance creation, I've gone with the set to possession. They do look to try and keep the ball as much as possible, work it, rotate it into certain triangular patterns of play, trying to break down the opposition, get the likes of Tony Kroos, Modric on the ball when they can, and try and, unlock the opposition's backline with a nice possession-based style of football. As for the width, however, it's a very narrow system. Of course, your fullbacks will be providing a lot of the width down each side. So more times than not, you are looking to try and channel a lot of your players down the central areas of the field and try and work it into those central areas, the likes of Bellingham, Modric, Kroos, Camavinga if you have him on the field, Valverde, of course. Try and get them as involved in the central areas of the pitch and then open up those wider flanks for your fullbacks to try and work into. As for the players in the box, though, I have set it to 6. More or less, it will be 3 players. The likes of Bellingham will be that added player in the attacking third, along with your 2 strikers trying to whip, trying to get on the end of those whips and crosses or those cutback opportunities and try and be a bit more of an attacking threat going forward. For your corners and free kicks, as per always, I've set it to 4. Now, starting off at the back with your goalkeeper for the instructions, of course, you've got Kepa. Can be Lunin or Kepa. I think they'd have the same set of instructions regardless. But for Kepa, of course, we have set him to a sweeper keeper. Of course, you are playing a very high line. You need a good goalkeeper on the ball that is very capable from playing out from the back, building that offensive platform that is required for the good teams, at least in possession, and he is very decent at doing so. For the saving on crosses, of course, Kepa's had his mistakes in the past, his errors. He's not the best at making sure he's claiming those aerial balls, so he more or less does tend to have a bit more of a balanced approach, whether it's sometimes claiming that ball in the air, other times looking to try and stay on his line and make the save. You will live and die by it, yes, but a balanced approach is a very realistic approach. As for your backline now, of course, we've got the likes of Rudiger and Fernandes, only because the other centre-backs are all injured, but nonetheless, they are set to their base set of instructions, so it doesn't really matter who you have in, whether it's Alaba, whether it's Militao, Rudiger, Fernandes. They're all going to be set to their base set of instructions. Now, moving out wide to your fullbacks, they have got the same set of instructions as well. And they are the width holders in this team. They'll look to try and hold the left or the right flank down, and then try and whip in crosses or cutback opportunities. So in order for them to be involved in the attacking play, you want them to join the attack more times, not bombing up and down the flanks respectively. And then in terms of the interceptions, it's set to normal. The run type is set to overlap, and this will help with the fact that they will be making those overlapping runs on the outside. And then for the defensive position, I've set it to stick to position. As you can see here for the likes of Mendy, he has got the same set of instructions as well. Into our midfield now, we've got the likes of Kroos and Valverde, slightly different and varying roles, but we'll start off with Valverde, of course, the more of the energized bunny rabbits, making sure he's making it very hard for the opposition to try and work into the midfield. And more or less, to try and replicate that, you'd want him trying to be a bit more zonal, cutting out passing lanes, making sure it's very hard for the opposition to try and squeeze balls in between the lines. For the attacking support though, I've set him to a balanced approach, so he can be a bit more of that box-to-box role, being very involved in the attacking outlets as well as the defensive outlets. Well, yes. For the interceptions, it's set to aggressive. You want to try and replicate that energy and that role that he does more or less trying to take up in most games and in most opportunities. He's very aggressive with his opponents, and he has a bit more of a battery to him. He's a bit of a Duracell battery, if you ask me. And then for the positioning freedom, it's set to stick to position, and the defensive positioning, it's set to cover the center, looking to try and sit in front of the back 4 times and sweep up in front of them. As for the likes of Toni Kroos, we've got him set to also being a bit more zonal, cutting out passing lanes, making sure it's kind of hard for the opposition to play through the lines. But of course, he isn't well known for his defensive outlet. It's more of the quarterback role that you're trying to replicate, and we will get there soon enough. But for the defense or the attacking support, he is set to stay back while attacking. So whereas Valverde will make those runs sometimes forward, he'll always look to try and hang back a bit more and try and facilitate from a deeper rate in the midfield. For the interceptions, I've gone with a conservative approach. You are looking to try and make sure that he is, or his stamina is not incredibly drained by the end of the game. You're looking for him to consistently look to pull strings, whip in those long balls over the top. And he's not really well known these days, especially for his defensive work rate. So in order to replicate his approach to the game, I think conservative best suits him. As for the positioning freedom though, having him be the deep line playmaker, drop between the back line at times, collect the ball for the goalkeeper or the centre backs, and then progress it forward, potentially spraying those long balls into the front line for those runners that you'll consistently have. Of course, it is a necessity, and it's a key aspect to Toni Kroos in this Real Madrid side. And then just like for Valverde, the defensive positioning is also set to cover the centre. Now moving on to your number 10s, both Bellingham and Modric have a similar role. Yes, both are playing as a number 10, but of course Bellingham will look to be a bit more attacking and get into the box and get on the end of those crosses and those cutbacks and try and score a bit more goals. So we'll start off with Bellingham. He's set to come back on defense, looking to consistently help out where he can. And also it does allow your 2 number 10s to have a slightly deeper starting role when you do get the ball back and when you do try and progress the ball up the field. And it will also allow them to get on the ball a bit more, which is more or less what you're trying to do. As for the support on crosses for Bellingham specifically, he is going to be set to get into the box. You want him landing on the end of those crosses or cutbacks and scoring those goals. For the positioning freedom for both of them, it will be set to free roam, allows them to pop up in those little half spaces or potentially pull players out of their natural positions and allow for your players to try and work into those unnatural positions and then try to exploit the opposition's back line. As for the interceptions, specifically for Bellingham now, it is set to aggressive. Of course, he is young. He does have the battery, the effortless work rate battery play style thing, where he's got a lot of stamina that he can use to try and exploit the opposition with, and aggressive interceptions can help you do that. As for the likes of Modric now, of course, very similar, comeback on defense, but this time the support on crosses is set to balance. So sometimes making his way into the box, other times looking to stay on the edge of the area. But just like for Bellingham, he is set to free roam, and then for the interceptions, it's set to normal. So not exactly being too aggressive on that right-hand side as what the left-hand side will be, but he can do a job nonetheless. Now moving on into your front line, the likes of Joselu, he is set to obviously a more natural number 9 position. So for the support runs, I've gone with a balance width, so sometimes having him have the ability to drift into those wider areas of the field, yes, but because he is going to be a target man, he will look to try and take up those more central areas and hold up the ball a bit more back into the opposition, just what a target man is expected to do. As for the interceptions, it's set to aggressive, looking to try and implement a bit more of a counter press in certain situations. And then for this defensive support, Ancelotti, he's been doing this of late, and that's more or less what helps this team be such an effective counter-attacking side. He leaves his 2 forwards out, and he waits for the ball to be turned over, and then obviously you have 2 men up the field, and it leads to a nice, quick, swift counter-attacking movement. So for Joselu, he is set to stay forward. As for the likes of Rodrigo, a very similar role, but of course, slightly different. Of course, you do have a bit more pace with Rodrigo. So for this support runs, you want him to have a balance with, so running the channels wide or potentially having a bit more of a central role when required. But most importantly, getting him behind. You want him to use his pace and his space to get into the back line of the opposition and try to exploit them. The interceptions are still set to aggressive, and just like with Joselu, he is set to be a bit more of an outlet player at times for the counter-attacks, the goalkeeper restarts, and he is going to be told to stay forward. Now, if you do make rotations to your side going forward, the likes of Ceballos and Brahim, they've also been playing every now and then in this side. So for the likes of Ceballos coming in for the likes of Luka Modric, everything will more or less be the same, except for the fact that the interceptions and the work rate will be there. Obviously, Luka Modric is in his late 30s now, or getting to that stage of his career where he doesn't have the time and effort to run around, whereas Ceballos, he's still in his 20s. He can definitely run around. He can definitely produce a bit more of a defensive outlet for the side. So the only real change is the interception set to aggressive, having a bit more of an aggressive front four. For the likes of Brahim now coming in, obviously he's not a natural striker, so Ancelotti's been very clever in playing him in a bit more of a false nine type role. But again, it will be a very similar role to what Vinicius Jr. will have if he does come into the side, and they do tend to use this set of tactics. So just like with Rodrigo, the right-hand side now will mirror that left-hand side, having the ability to have a balanced approach, whether he can choose to drift wide or stay central, but most importantly, looking to get him behind. Now, I was a bit, mixed between the ability of him dropping down as a false nine or having the ability to get him behind, but he does make those runs in behind more times than not. So I think getting behind, I don't think you can go wrong with that, but if you do choose to have a bit more of a false nine approach, have a bit more hold up play, have a bit more structure to your offensive build-up, I think that the false nine is also a good option to go with. The interceptions are still set to aggressive, but now the only real change I have made is the defensive support is set to a balanced approach. So having him sometimes drop a bit deeper, get on the ball. I mean, he scored a goal the other day where he was practically on the halfway line, got the ball into feet, turned, spun the defender, and was in, and he scored a fantastic goal. So you are trying to have Brahim drop a bit deeper. But I would say this for Vinicius, probably have him stay forward and have both Rodrigo and Vinicius high up for those counter-attacking potential movements. So of course, when Real Madrid look to try and be a bit more defensive, a bit more sound, they look to try and revert to this 4-4-2 formation, and it does help them in the counter-attack as well as trying to defend their goal. So with the tactics going forward, it's a 4-4-2 holding. I've made no changes to it, so it's one goalkeeper, two centre-backs, two full-backs, two DMs, two wider midfielders, and then of course two strikers. So now moving on to the tactics, and there's no major changes to it, you could say. The tactical vision is still set to custom. The defensive style, however, is still set to the same. The team width is slightly more narrow. Of course, you're looking for a bit more defensive solidarity and making sure it's nice and compact at the back. But the major change for this is the depth of the back line. Of course, it's now set to 30, which is a low block. Two banks of four protecting the back line and the goalkeeper from any potential shots. You are going to try and shrink and try and counter-attack a bit more now with this defensive tactics. So I don't think you can go wrong. It does help you more times than not with making sure you're securing a 1-0 lead, or you're trying to see out the game very effectively, might I say. For the offense though, it's still set to a balanced approach for the build-up play, but this time with the chance creation, the other major change to it is it's set to direct passing. Now this will obviously encourage your forwards and your wider midfielders to make those runs in behind, have the likes of Toni Kroos get on the ball, whipping those crosses over the top of the back line of the opposition and trying to exploit them as much as possible. As for the width, it's also slightly more shriveled, set to 30 this time, and the players in the box slightly higher, but that will encourage players to get forward, and of course the direct passing does inevitably enable that. And then for the corners and the free kicks, as per always, I've set it to 4. Now starting off at the back with the goalkeeper, Kepa is still set to the same set of instructions, as is Rudiger and Fernandes, but now the major changes start occurring here with your backline. You don't really want your fullbacks bombing on as frequently as what they would with the balanced approach, so they'll have a balanced attacking run or attacking thought pattern for their attacking run. So again, balanced is best. Interception is still set to normal, the run type is set to overlap, and this time the defensive positioning, because you want them to be a bit more aggressive on the defensive side of things, is now set to step up. As you can see here for the likes of Carvajal, he's got the same set of instructions. Onto your midfield now with Valverde. He's got basically the same set of instructions. Of course, it's a slightly deeper rate that he will be working at, but nonetheless, he'll still be that box-to-box player that's looking to try and stifle and break up as much of the opposition's ball to play as possible. The likes of Toni Kroos this time, the only real change for him, essentially, is the interceptions. It's not set to conservative anymore. He will look to be a bit more attentive to the defensive side of things, realizing that the opposition is going to be coming at you a lot more. So for the interceptions, I've set it to normal. Onto your wider midfielders now, of course, they're not number 10s anymore. They're now left and right midfielders, respectively. So for the likes of Bellingham and Modric, they have very similar roles. So come back on defense, obviously looking to try and help out the defense where they can. And then when you do have the ball, they'll look to try and cut inside and come short a bit more, linking up with the likes of Kroos, Valverde, Rodrigo, and Joselu more narrowly in certain moments. And then for the interceptions for Bellingham, it is set to aggressive, and the support on crosses, just like with the number 10 role, it's set to get into the box. Whereas the likes of Modric, he has the same set of instructions except for the bottom bit, the balanced approach for the crossing run, so sometimes making it into the box, and of course now that you have a slightly higher plays in the box approach with it set to 7, he will sometimes look to make that run into the attacking third a bit more, but other times looking to hang on the edge of the area and trying to facilitate. And then for the interceptions, it's also set to aggressive, helping him set the tone from the front going back. Now moving into your forward line, of course, we've got the likes of Rodrigo and Joselu. So for Rodrigo, a slightly different role compared to the base set of instructions. So starting off with the support runs, it's still set to a balance with having the ability to drift in and out of the central areas of the pitch. But for the attacking runs, it's not just set to get in behind. Of course, you do have the direct passing, which will encourage your forwards to naturally make that run in behind. So you do want to have a bit more of a different aspect to Rodrigo in this role, having him play as a false 9 in certain moments, a target man and others, link up a bit more with Joselu, and make sure that they are looking after the ball high field. So you don't always want those runs in behind for this particular set of instructions. For the interceptions, sorry, I made a mistake. But for the interceptions, it's set to aggressive. You still want that aggressive nature to him. And then, of course, like I said earlier, Ancelotti tends to leave his forwards up the field and allow them to try and counter-attack when they do win that ball back defensively wise. And more or less, because you have a very sturdy 2 banks of 4, you don't really need extra players in and around there. And then finally, moving on to the likes of Joselu, a very similar role yet again. Balance with target man, of course, aggressive interceptions, yes, and then of course, stay forward. You want him and Rodrigo to be the outlet balls more times than not. So yes, people, that is my version of Carlo Ancelotti's 4-2-2 system, as well as the defensive system of the 4-4-2. If you have enjoyed this, please smash that like button. Out of 10, I would probably give this an 8. I think it's a very easy and simple system to use, and because it's so simple and easy to use, I can't rate it too highly. I think for the defensive side of things, it's very solid, and of course the attacking elements that this side brings with it, it's very amazing attacking outlets. I think it's very, very nice. So, of course, as always, have a damn great day. I'm out!